Victoria here. I'm here today to do part one of my March reading wrap up. March has been a weird month so far. I have definitely gravitated towards bigger reads, and then I've sort of put myself into like a reading slump because they're so massive and it just takes me so long to read them, which tends to happen when I read bigger books. But some of the books most of the books I read were really good. I just had one or two books that just really slowed down my pace. And I also did read quite a bit of nonfiction this month, which sort of happened by accident, to be honest with you. I just was picking up reads and they tend to be nonfiction. But yeah, let's get into it. So, the first book that I finished reading in this part of the month was The Threat by Andrew McCabe. I'll put a picture up here. A book that was written by the former FBI director at the middle of Trump's term. And he had been in the FBI for like 30 years. And it just really broke down a bunch of cases that I was unfamiliar with or didn't know about or didn't pay attention to. It talked about Timothy McVeigh. It talked about Benghazi. It talked about Russian interference in the election. It talks about his firing from Trump's administration. It was really, really interesting. And also talked just a lot about the FBI and the process, but also like the cases that he was involved in. Definitely gave me like a really well thought out view of like what these situations was without all the politics. And sometimes when you hear about these things, the talk and the discourse you hear is very, very politically motivated. And I appreciated this book. There was nothing of that in here, and it just simply gave you the facts, and it changed my view on a couple of things. I'll be a little bit honest, but it was very, very interesting. I really liked him as a narrator. He read it himself, and I just thought it was a really, really fascinating read. But yeah, it was very, very good. I don't do reviews for nonfiction, but I would give this one 5 stars. I thought it was very impressive how it sort of broke everything down in non-political terms, but just sort of gave you the facts and sort of taught you about the FBI. So I really like this one, and I wound up giving it 5 stars. Reading was another one that I read on my Kindle, and that is The Promise Volume 2 in the Avatar The Last Airbender rhyme. And this is the first series of comics that were written in the Avatar line. And here is a pretty photo. Follows the aftermath of the effects of book 3 and where they are, and they're sort of trying to make sure the world is a better place. And there's a promise that Aang made to Zuko that is sort of causing a little bit of friction. I'm really excited to see how this series, this like roundup ends, and to head into more of them, because I really want to read all these comics before I start Korra. It may not happen, but that's my goal. But I really, really wound up liking this one as well and gave this one 4 stars. That I'm really struggling with, I'll be a little bit honest. I really am struggling with Christian Kashour's writing. I had similar thoughts when I read Graceling. I like the characters. I thought the world building was super interesting, but the plot and the pacing I really struggle with. Now I know these books have been written a while ago, but I really struggled with this one. I only gave it 3 stars, and I just slogged through it. The characters are great. I just don't feel super connected to her writing style, and her plots are a little bit too meandering for my liking and not so action packed. I know these are written quite a long time ago. I am excited to read Bitter Blue because that has a character that I really, really like in it, and I do want to read Winterkeep as well because I do have an arc of it. But I will admit, this book just has not. The series overall has not impressed me. I remember the last time I read her other book, which was Jane Unlimited. I didn't love it either, so maybe it's just that I'm not clicking with her writing style super well. But this book follows a character named Fire who is considered a monster because she was bred from a monster. And she has the power of mind control, which again seems like an awesome power. But and she has the power to like convince people to do what she wants, and she kind of gets thrown into this political world which she was not expecting. There's romance, there's drama. This plot had some elements that were really similar to Graceling, and I just would have liked her to see to go in a totally different direction, and that just didn't happen in this read. I liked it. I gave it 3 stars. I am going to read Bitter Blue. I'm supposed to read Bitter Blue this month. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I did like it. It just wasn't my favorite, and this put me into a little bit of a reading slump because I really struggled to get through it. I read was All the Tides in Fate by Adeline Grace, which is the sequel to All the Stars in Teeth. I really, really like this one. This one was the sequel, the round up to the series, and this one definitely had more of an adventure element to it. The back is break the curse, save the kingdom, reclaim from their magic, the queen must prevail. And it was great. It was a fast-paced read with sea elements, with adventuring elements, with a romance, some characters, friendship, a found family. I really, really like this one. Gave it 5 stars. Definitely check out this series. I think it would be a great spring read because it does have to do a lot with the water. And this one also was very, very politically heavy, which I really like. I love political reads, so this one definitely dived a little bit more into that. The romance was interesting in this book. It was not what I expected at the end of All the Stars and Teeth, but I really liked it and wound up giving this one 5 stars, and I'm definitely excited to see what Adeline Grace is working on next. But overall, really like this one. Very, 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 very strong conclusion. Very, very strong duology. Sometimes I struggle with duologies a little bit, but I thought that this one was super effective at kind of getting everything done and handling all the plot elements. And it definitely did bring some tears to my eyes. I will agree. There was some heart-wrenching moments in this book that I did not expect, but overall, really, really enjoyed it. Sort of a surprise. It's called Good Morning, Good Night by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Here is a photo. Sort of randomly, but it basically has every morning on Twitter, Lin-Manuel Miranda wakes us all up and he gives us like an aspirational quote, and then when he stops being on Twitter for the day, he sort of says goodnight and he sort of gives you like what an aspirational quote that are sort of connected. So this whole book basically has him reading these quotes to you, and I just loved it. I read it like 2 to 3 times in a week, and I found it to be so inspiring. It was great. I think everyone should pick this book up. I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda is an awesome narrator, but also his advice was just super helpful and super good in any situation. I really, really liked it. I definitely want to read more books that he's like, he's the narrator for, but I just loved it. I thought it was great. It was really fun. I had listened to somebody recently that said that they found a book that they could read every single day on their commute to work. This is something I could literally read every single day on my commute to work. I could listen to it like every single day. Because every single day that you read it, you kind of get something new out of it depending on what life situation you're in at that moment or how your day is going. And I really, really liked it. I also like him. He's just a great like voice actor, so he can really like play a lot with a lot of things, and I just found it to be awesome. So if you've not checked this one out and you're going back to work and you want just a fun thing for your commute, I definitely recommend this one. I found it to be a great read, really inspirational, and I'll probably read it a couple more times this year as well. But it's only like 42 minutes, so you could definitely get through it pretty quickly. But is another nonfiction read. This has definitely been the month of nonfiction because my physical reads have been so massive and I wanted some shorter reads. This one is I Like to Watch by Emily Nussbaum, which I heard about from Super Space Check, but here's a photo. She changed her name recently to Merrily Kristen, but still a great content creator, and I've been stealing her nonfiction recommendations like for the past 2 years. But I finally wound up picking this one up. So this one is she's basically a TV like journalist, and she kind of collected like 13 or 14 of her favorite essays and sort of put them in a book. I am a big TV watcher. I love TV. I also like movies, but TV is where I love because I think you can follow characters in a more long form format. You get more hours with these characters, and I love it. My biggest complaint sometimes about the Marvelverse is that I want just more time with these characters. And now we're getting TV shows, which I love, but I just hope that maybe like Spider-Man will get a TV show and then my heart will be set for like 17 years. But this one really tackled some of the older TV series that I really have never watched, but I like to see her point of view on it. It talked about Lost, it talked about Sopranos, it talked about Buffy, which I have watched, which is one of my favorite shows. But again, when I was younger, I did not fall into the typical like TV categories. I was very much like a science fiction and fantasy, and I feel that those shows don't get written about enough. So my education about like these bigger series, adult series, just never really crossed my radar, and I haven't watched them and don't really have any interest in watching them either. But I really liked her take. I read it in like 2 days. Very, very fast paced, very, very interesting, and I would definitely read more books by her in the future for sure. Behemoth, and that is A Chain of Iron by Cassie Clare. This is definitely the highlight read of the month so far. I love Chain of Gold. I loved reading Chain of Iron. I have the audiobook. I had the physical book. I got the ebook because I could not lug this around. But I love this book so much. I thought it was a great sequel to the series. It also gave us a lot of background information. My only regret that I had is that I should have re-listened to Chain of Iron before I started this. There was a lot of reveals about Grace. There was a massive reveal at the end that even I didn't see coming, which really shocked me. There was a lot of elements in this book, super fast paced. I would say the first 100 pages of this book was definitely setting the stage, but the end, the last 100 pages was wild and crazy. This book is about 600 pages, and it took me about a week to read this one, but I really, really loved it. I love Cassie Clare's writing style. I think every single series she writes just gets better and better and better. I think that this is my favorite set of characters other than my Simon, Izzy, and that gang, but I really, really love this cast of characters quite a bit. I love the time period that we're in. I love the diversity. I think it's great. If you want to, I do have a non-spoiler reading vlog on my channel. I think it's spoiler and non-spoiler, but I think it went up the week before I posted this video. So go check that out if you want to hear more of my spoiler thoughts or more of my thoughts as I'm reading it. But I really like this one and wound up giving it 5 stars and cannot wait for the third book, but I'm definitely going to have to reread these books before that book comes out. So I might make that a summer project or an early 2022 project before the third book comes out. But really happy that I read it. Was a behemoth, but totally worth it. I started the Owl Crate Readathon, which I'm actually in the middle of doing as I'm filming this video, but that was the first one I finished was Goddess and the Machine by Laura Beth Johnson. This was also the Time Warp YA Book Club book for the month of March. I started this book thinking it was going to be a pure science fiction adventure story, and it does have elements of this book, but this is one of those books that really can sort of be anything. It's a very, very unique sort of novel, but you basically follow this character named Andrea, and she winds up being stuck into a cryogenic sleep and winds up waking up 1,000 years after her family died. And it's sort of a mystery sort of solving where she is, and also everyone thinks she's a goddess. Everyone thinks she's this god for some for some of her behavior with technology. You also have these 2 princes that she's connected with, and it was a really unique novel. I never sort of knew where we were going. I like the characters. I liked all the side characters. There was definitely some moments that sort of pushed my emotional buttons. The way this book was structured was also really interesting because you had 2 characters. You had Andrea, who is kind of becoming acquainted to this world, and then you have Zaid, who is well acquainted with this world, and his talking and how he talks and his slang was really interesting for the first couple of chapters because I really didn't know what he was saying. It was a little bit hard to follow, but sort of understand what was being said about that. Overall, I liked it. The ending really shocked me. I definitely want to check out book 2. It wasn't what I was expecting as a true science fiction read, but it was unique enough to kind of capture my attention, and I wound up giving this one 4 stars. And then the last physical book I finished in this reading vlog that reading vlog for this part of the month was The World's Greatest Detective by Caroline Carlson, and this was an Owl Crate Jr. pick from a couple of years ago. I think it's 2 or 3 years ago at this point. But this follows this guy named Toby Montorsa, and he is basically an orphan. He's sent to live with his uncle after all of his other relatives decide that he can't live with them, and his uncle is a detective at this detective row set in the past. It's not super specific when it's set though, but his uncle winds up getting an invitation to go to this detective weekend to solve a crime and be called the world's greatest detective, and his uncle declines, and he winds up taking up the mantle because he needs $10,000 so he doesn't have to go to an orphanage. And it just sort of goes from there. There's an actual mystery that they have to solve. There's a young girl named Ivy that becomes very instrumental. It was really a procedural, a very, very basic procedural mystery novel, but for kids. And I really, really liked it. I thought it was very, very fun. There was a lot of moments in this book that just put a smile on my face, and I really, really enjoyed it. I definitely want to check more by this author in the future. So these were the first books that I finished for the Owl Crate Readathon. I hope to finish a couple more today, but we'll see. And then the last book that I finished this month was How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. This was the nonfiction book I bought over the summer, right around Black Lives Matter and the death of some of the horrible events that happened, George Floyd and stuff. So I actually picked this up as an audiobook, and I really liked him reading it to me. This was a nice balance between like history of, racism and anti-racism in our country, how to be a better ally, which I really appreciated, but also his story, and his story was really, really interesting. I really, really liked it. Wound up giving this one 4.5 stars. Would definitely recommend you read it. I would say if you have not read any anti-racist literature, I would maybe read a book before this. I would recommend Me and White Supremacy, or another book that was a little bit more foundational. This one had a nice balance between him telling you about his life, but also sort of like giving you information. There is like, every chapter is sort of broken up into like a topic. Like this one's a biology, and then you have some definitions at the top, and then it sort of goes into like his life. But I really, really found it interesting, super compelling, really an important read. If you guys want to see all the anti-racist literature books that I've read recently, write it in the comments, and I'll try to do that before the summer. But I hope you guys are staying safe and being well. That's all the books that I wound up finishing so far in March, and I'll see you guys for my end of my March reading wrap up around April. Bye, guys.